Welcome to the Mail Time Podcast. I'm joined today by Ori Shacham of Magen David Adom. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to start with trying to dispel some of the misconceptions of those of us in America who hear the name Magen David Adom, see your beautiful uniforms, you look very legitimate, but have no idea how Magen David Adom actually interacts with the Israeli government. Can you just go into a little bit of what is Magen David Adom?
Yeah, of course. Magen David Adom is Israel's emergency medical services. Basically, it means that we provide medical attention in any medical distress throughout the country, regardless of where somebody is at. This is Magen David Adom mandate given by the government to provide first aid services. That means that we are the one that respond for any emergency. I'll elaborate it in a few seconds how we do this, gather as fast as possible, and also transport after providing medical care. This is one part of our roles. The other one is being the national blood services for the entire country. That means that we collect, process, and provide blood both to the hospitals and to the IDF. This has been one of the major tasks that we've been dealing with during the war, providing the medical attention to the injured. Another very important part is emergency preparedness. That means that we work together with the IDF, with the Home Front Command, and with the police in getting prepared for all kind of emergencies. God forbid, if something happens, Magen David Adom will be there for the citizen. This is in large our roles and responsibilities. Now, how does it come into when somebody is having medical distress? If somebody is now undergoing a heart attack, God forbid, or is involved in a car accident, he would immediately call the emergency dispatch of Magen David Adom, the national dispatch 101. This is the number. In Israel, we use different numbers, not like the United.
Wait, this is an important clarification. So it's not 911 where if you have police, fire, any sort of emergency, you're calling the same number. In Israel, it's very different.
Indeed, because when you call 911 in the States, the first question is, what is your emergency? Now you start explaining what's the emergency, and it takes time. In Israel, we say we want to have a medical professional online as you call. So Magen David Adom dispatch will respond to your phone call within 1 to 3 seconds. As fast as this, and you'll have either an EMT or paramedic answering your call. Their most important task is to understand what's happening on the other side of the line. And if it's a baby having seizures, they will instruct you of what to do. If this is somebody that needs a CPR, they will immediately tell you how to do a CPR. And then there is the issue of, okay, if Magen David Adom dispatchers are so busy in explaining what to do, then who is actually getting the information of where the incident is and what's the additional details? And for this, we use the state-of-the-art technology developed in-house according to the needs of the paramedics on the ground. So we can geolocate where the incident is using the cell phone of the caller. Once we know where the incident is, we automatically start to trace the most available resources to respond to this call. Now, when I say resources, it can be a variety of means. Of course, ambulances, which is the nearest ambulances to the scene. But even before the ambulances, who is the first responder, which is the most available and closest to the scene? Magen David Adom operates or in charge of operating the entire first responders in the state of Israel.
And you have a mandate, right? So if someone calls, you can't say, oh, well, our closest responder is 15 minutes away, so we're going to leave this for someone else. You have to respond by law, correct?
More than this, it's not a question whether we cherry pick the calls. Anybody that calls, whether he is in the middle of Jerusalem, in the middle of the desert, or in the Golan Heights, it is Magen David Adom responsibility of answering. And this is why we invest so much in training people from all the communities in Israel. We have Magen David Adom first responders, volunteers, team members in all of the communities in Israel. Hence, God forbid something happens, we have a network of volunteers spread throughout the country and are able to respond in a matter of seconds.
And when that happens, you are dispatching to one of, I think it's about 20 Hatzalas that are operating with in coordination with Magen David Adom?
You know, in the states, what happens sometimes if you have a medical emergency, you call 911 and you call the local Hatsala.
Right. If you're in I would say a traditionally more observant community in America, say New York City, Brooklyn, in the five towns, right, or here down in South Florida.
Right. Then you would call the local Hatsala and someone will get them first. In Israel, Magen David Adom provides the entire chain. It's like a one-stop shop. You have a medical emergency, call Magen David Adom. We are operating all the first responders, whether they are Magen David Adom volunteers, whether they are part of the more than 20 Hatsala organizations that operate in Israel, Hatsala Gush Dan, Hatsala Bnei Brak, Hatsala Lachi, all around. So we trace them according to their location, and we immediately send the nearest 5 or 10 first responders, even prior to the arrival of the ambulance. Now, it's not that they arrive and then they decide whether the ambulance is needed. The ambulance will go in parallel. The role of the first responders is to be there in a matter of seconds, provide the immediate care needed, and then integrate together with the ambulance teams in continue and providing the medical care, then taking the patient to the hospital. This is how we minimize the response time. And this is crucial when we speak about medical emergencies, especially those that endanger life.
How do you work to ensure that your response time is always getting better? Obviously, I'm assuming that you're always going to want to get there faster and have better care. What steps has Magen David Adom taken over, let's say, the last decade to get to the scene faster?
So first and foremost, we keep developing the network of first responder. The other thing that we did is we are using a system to analyze where emergency calls are coming from. So using machine learning processes and AI processes, we actually see where calls came from in the last 3 years. And based on this analysis, we actually send teams to be in a neighborhood or in a vicinity of areas where calls are coming from. We actually predict where the next call would come.
Does that actually work?
It does work. It works in more than 90% of the cases. So we have small vehicles, like the two-man vehicle manned by 2 paramedics. And we are telling them, listen, now you should go to this and this neighborhood in Tel Aviv, or now you should move to this area in Jerusalem, because based on what we know from the past, an emergency would probably occur in this time of day, in this day during.
So you're saying that based on the statistical likelihood that something happens, you're able to say this is where you should be, similar to, I guess, how a crossing guard might go to a certain crossing guard for children on the way to school. You'd say this is a dangerous intersection, so we should probably pay attention to what's going on.
Exactly. This is actually planning in advance, instead of waiting for an incoming call to arrive and then say, okay, where's the first responders, where the nearest ambulance. So we are proactively moving our additional teams in order to be at the vicinity where a thing will happen or will probably happen.
Understood. What would you say has been the biggest challenge for Magen David Adom in the last, say, decade or two?
Well, since the health in Israel is much more advanced nowadays, we see much more calls coming in from elderly people. People expect us to be there anytime, anywhere, anywhere. The medical emergencies has become more, I would say, more complex. With that, thank God we have a lot of new babies coming in. So we needed to think of how we provide the services as rapid as possible, as well as addressing medical emergencies that we weren't addressing in recent years. So what we did, we actually integrated all kind of first responders. Only lately, we have integrated nurses that are taking care of child labor. In order to assist women that are giving birth at their homes, not because they intend to, because this is the reality, to act as first responders. I think this is a first time in the world where nurses that are coming from, babies' wards are integrated into the EMS system, allowing us to provide the service regardless where it happens, as long as we have a nurse over there. So, regarding the blood services, it has been more and more challenging to collect blood, especially during holidays, and we use the power of community, the fact that we have people all around Israel in order to collect blood during holidays within Arab communities or during Ramadan within Jewish communities. And when you look at the Israelis' willingness to come and provide blood for people whom they don't know and who they never met, this is amazing. This is really amazing.
And by the way, so now people know my podcast. I ask all the uncomfortable questions. So I'm going to ask you. Some allege that you're either charging for blood or selling blood or something along those lines. What's the story there?
So regarding blood, we don't charge. We ask the people to come and donate. We are not willing to pay for blood because...
But what about to organizations that need it, or if there's some sort of government agency? Is there any transaction when it comes to blood? There's like some allegation online. I don't know what it is.
So we don't pay for people to give us blood. Nevertheless, according to the decision made by the Minister of Health, we get funds for providing blood to the hospital. That means if you come and donate blood, Magen David Adom will process it, will deliver it to the hospital, and will get fund from it. The fee for a unit of blood is set by the Ministry of Health. Not the actual blood, but the process it takes in order to test the blood, to divide it for three.
So if I understand correctly, you're essentially making sure that everything is done properly, and you are providing a service to these hospitals, which they otherwise would have to hire staff and buy equipment. And instead of them doing that, you are processing the blood as a service for them. And then the government, not Magen David Adom administrators, but the government is made the decision that you need to be compensated for that time because you are paying people to do that. Okay. That makes sense.
Let me tell you this. We have to test all the blood because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that...
Hey, you don't want to give people diseases.
Exactly. Right. It has to be completely safe. It has to undergo many testing. The process is very complex, but we know that the blood that's supplied by Magen David Adom to the hospitals and to the IDF is completely safe. And speaking about blood, during the war, we have provided whole units of whole blood to the IDF. This whole blood units were able, together with rapid transportation by the IDF, were able to decrease the mortality rate of soldiers by 50% in comparison to 2014.
Well, that I think that you definitely had some role in that. I have to push back on one thing because I'm very mad at the Army medics when it comes to the way that the Army does it, not you, but the Army, they keep referring to this blood. I agree that the blood helps. It also helps that people got upgraded equipment, because what they're doing is they're basically saying, they're comparing. It's like if you got in a car accident in 1965 versus if you got in a car accident in 2025, did you fly through the windshield and then have a chance of surviving? Yes, you have a better chance of surviving with better equipment as well. So that's not your intention, but I'm only saying that because I'm ticked off at the way that the ministers are talking about it, because it has to do with the fact that instead of having a helmet from 1978, if you, God forbid, got shot in the head, you have a helmet from 2025 that someone donated, you're going to have a better chance of surviving as well. That has nothing to do with what you said, but it's just me making sure that the Ministry of Health doesn't get the victory on this one. I won't give it to them.
So the fact that soldiers were transported from within the Gaza Strip was very helpful. That the fact that they didn't have to go all the way out and then being taken care by the helicopter. Right. So it's a variety of factors. Blood is one of them, but for sure not the only one.
Right. So I think this is important, and some of the things we talked about before, and I just think there's so much misinformation when it comes to understanding nonprofits and understanding the relationship with the state of Israel. The state of Israel is a very young state, 77 years old. There's a lot of bureaucracy. It doesn't necessarily work so efficiently. I would love to see kind of a Doge, as we saw in America with Elon Musk, where you eliminate some of these bureaucratic things. I think it would be good for everyone. And I think that transparency is also really great. And that's why I try to talk about these issues online and have this podcast. And again, I appreciate you taking the time. So when it comes to another issue that people raise about Magen David Adom is the relationship between the state and Magen David Adom. Is it truly a nonprofit? Is it for profit? Like, are you guys making profit? That's something that I think needs to be dispelled for the crowd that thinks that you are basically making money on the backs of poor, dying Israelis. So are you a for-profit entity?
So the straight question is no. We are not a profit organization. We do charge for ambulance transportation. I'll cut straight to the point. But the charge that we charge for an ambulance, first and foremost, it's by law. So the state of Israel has decided that a transport by an ambulance would be cost money, and the government is setting the prices. But here's
Well, I just want to say it's like basic economics, right? Zoran Mamdani, the lunatic anti-Semite, he goes in New York and he's like, free this, free that, free that. I mean, free is not necessarily good for the society. And I think that the economics dictate that you should probably pay for some of these services. And it makes sense because you also don't want people calling for every single cut. That doesn't make sense. If you have a little cut on your hand, just go to your cabinet and get a Band-Aid.
At the end of the day, when you need to have a fleet of 2,000 ambulances and you need to make sure that you're ready for any emergency, then you need to see that your services are covered. But, and this is the but with a capital B, most of the citizens don't pay out of their pocket for the ambulance transportation. So if somebody is taken to the hospital, and about 70 to 80%, the fee for transportation is covered by its medical insurance, by its Kupat Cholim, HMO. So people don't actually pay out of the...
Well, they're paying through socialized medicine in Israel, so you're paying your taxpayer, yes. But you're not saying you're not going and...
That you need to think, should I call an ambulance or should I call Magen David Adom because it will cost me money? No. If you are in a medical distress, call Magen David Adom. The medical insurance will probably cover it. And even if somebody has to pay because the medical insurance says it's not covered because it wasn't like a medical emergency that demanded you for going to the hospital. If somebody doesn't have the money to pay or is very poor, a Holocaust survivor, we have funds that covers this. So we are not trying to make money on somebody.
But you're basically trying to make sure that you run a halfway decent organization that has flaws, but you work on them and get better. Again, I think that there's this tendency, especially in the TikTok age and the Instagram age and everything like this, free. And I think that it leads people to not actually see what's going on and the costs involved to dedicate yourself to saving lives. And it makes sense why you would need to cover the costs of what it takes to drive from point A to point B. It makes sense.
Exactly. And any funds that comes to Magen David Adom eventually goes for further development, for more technology, for more medical equipment, for more training for people around Israel. So it's not that we are taking this money and providing it to our people. All the salaries of Magen David Adom people, the paramedics, the EMTs that run to the field, is supervised by the government. There is a special official in the government that supervises. It's not that we are paying salaries that we can pay or is paid in the software industry or something like this. People are here in Magen David Adom for others, to help others, and they are doing this out of dedication and out of professionalism. And I think that people should know this. They are really fighters for life.
When it comes to the relationship with American Friends of Magen David Adom, is American Friends of Magen David Adom paying for your salaries? Is that like what, when you go to a gala or you go around to a synagogue or you go around anywhere in America and you're asking for people to help American Friends of Magen David Adom, is that to pay for the basic salaries and expenses of the executive team in Israel?
No. This is to pay for the development of Magen David Adom, for purchasing more ambulances, for having special equipment for transportation of people during mass casualty incidents, for restocking the ambulance, for sometimes to further developing of the software. The most interesting thing is funds collected by American Friends of Magen David Adom isn't just sent to Israel to like a bucket of money where Magen David Adom just take whatever they want. Magen David Adom provides with American Friends with invoices.
So it's dollar for dollar. Every dollar that's sent to Israel from American Friends of Magen David Adom to Israel is accounted for on an invoice.
Definitely.
That's incredible.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if a donor to American Friends of Magen David Adom wants to say, okay, I gave money for defibrillators. Where did my money go? We can show him an invoice. Listen, this is an invoice saying you purchased 10 defibrillators. They were received in Magen David Adom and this and that date. And please, American Friends of Magen David Adom, pay directly to the supplier of the defibrillator. So it doesn't go through somebody, or it doesn't go through like a pool of money where everybody can take. Being accountable for our patients on the one hand and our donors on the other hand is something that is so important for us. You mentioned transparency. Exactly like I'm transparent with my team on the ambulance, with the hospital team, we are completely transparent with our donors. That's the strength, one of the strengths of Magen David Adom. Whatever we have, we put it on the table, nothing to hide.
And I think one of their strengths, I think you're so focused on that, and I've said this to you now offline, but the marketing, I'm really glad we're able to talk down so that you're able to sit here and talk, because I think that some of these misconceptions come from a vacuum. And when people don't know, they just make all sorts of crazy assumptions, and they read one line in an article and they think, oh, this must be true. Or they see a book and it says this, and oh my God, this is horrible. So I think it's important to keep talking about it. And I hope we are able to talk many more times about these kinds of issues. I want to talk also there. I know I just spoke to Manny Fabian of the Times of Israel earlier this week, and he was talking about how the reviews from the IDF on October 7th have a very narrow scope, and obviously there's a lot of controversy now about whether the government is going to do if they're going to agree to investigation on October 7th. But I want to clarify a few things for the record here about Magen David Adom on October 7th. Was your team instructed to run away or not help people?
Hell no, no way. The opposite is true. From the first minutes of this tragic attacks, Magen David Adom teams or volunteers in the kibbutzim themselves responded to their own community. Well, most of the people I heard the story of Amit Man, but we also have stories from others. Tzvi Riedel, who is our volunteer from Kibbutz Saad, at 7 a.m. was already at his second transport of ambulances. Rafi Semet from Kibbutz Kisufim, our volunteer, had to take care of his grandchild that was shot by a terrorist. Another of our volunteers, Chubara, unfortunately had to take care of his son that was murdered that day.
And Aaron Chaimov.
Aaron Chaimov, one of our heroes that took off from his house in Ofakim towards the junction in Urim and was killed by a terrorist. Magen David Adom teams were at the first line of defense, of protecting life that day. Nobody gave an instruction to back up. In several roads, we open up like primary care points for people fleeing out of the Nova. This is in time where roads were blocked by terrorists, or the army said, listen, you are not going in because this is a war zone. This is a war zone. And in Magen David Adom stations in Sderot, in Ofakim, in Netivot, we actually had like field hospitals.
You were listening to what the army was telling you, and obviously the army I'll say it, I'm not asking you to say it, but the army made obviously a series of mistakes, and they're trying to gain control of the situation. So it wasn't as if you're saying, oh, it's dangerous to run away. It was more the army doesn't know what's going on, so you have to wait to understand what the situation is, because you're not going to send your medic to commit suicide.
In war zone, I don't think anybody expects from medics going intentionally inside. I'm speaking about civilian.
Right. You're not embedded with the IDF.
Right.
Okay.
But where our teams were already in the war zone throughout the kibbutzim, and it's all of the kibbutzim, including the area of Tzochar, where our teams were besieged in a synagogue for like 30 hours, taking care of people. When they were already in the war zone, nobody told them, go back, flee for your life, save everyone. They were there fighting for others' life, and unfortunately, Aaron Chaimov, Amit Man, and 5 more paid the ultimate price and were killed.
And I think it's interesting, again, it's important because in today's day and age of hyper media and people trying to tell this story and that story and everything, it's really important to take a second and actually understand the full scope of what happened, right? And just for the listener, in case people aren't familiar, there's 2 heads of the different divisions within the Gaza division. You had Chaim Cohen, who was head of the North, and Asaf Hamami, Hashem Yikom Damo, who was head of the southern part of the Gaza division. Chaim Cohen came in from his house. Asaf Hamami was there with his son alone. Asaf ran out and was murdered, I believe, right around 7 o'clock in the morning. So
After declaring
after
at the
declaring
military,
war, right,
this
right,
is war. We are
right.
at war.
So
Usually,
but part of the problem that then emerges as you have dozens and dozens of infiltrations is you have one of the people who would be looking at the screen, Asaf Hamami, is dead, and there's an overwhelming amount of Nukhba coming forward. So it's not, you don't have a clear picture of what's going on. So it takes time for the army to reestablish what was actually going on, where to send people, what's safe, is it dangerous, where can people go and not get killed. So it's not as if you guys are sitting there saying we have to run. You're basically listening for the military professionals to say, okay, we need
where you can go.
this is safe. You're not going to send someone to get killed. Right. Okay. That's a good clarification because I think that again, things just get misconstrued.
And the thing is, we were once again very creative that day. Usually, Magen David Adom operates one helicopter in the south of Israel. That day, we tripled the number. We had 3 helicopters going back and forth in and out of the dangerous areas where they were relatively safe, but still dangerous. Evacuating soldiers, evacuating police officers, evacuating civilians. Dozens of people evacuated that day, thanks to the helicopters and the creativity and the preparedness of Magen David Adom. It was total chaos. But at the end of the day, I think that Magen David Adom was ready, although nobody.
You could never have been ready for everything that happened. Yeah. Right. You did the best job you possibly could in the situation, right? I mean, it's like nobody planned. The army didn't plan for 5,000 people to come over the border.
When I say we were ready, that means that we had enough ambulances, we have the team members, we had people in the communities as ready as you can be for this unbelievable chaos.
Another question I have for you is, how many people call the 101 line every single day? And if Magen David Adom didn't answer that phone call at that moment, they'd be dead. So it's, the heart of my question is how much is truly an emergency phone call versus I have a weird feeling in my stomach and maybe I might have kidney stones, but perhaps you come over and help, right? How many people would you say, and I don't need the official statistic, but what would you say in your gut tells you how many are true emergencies every single day that 101 gets?
I would say there is something that we call red code. That is people who are unconscious, need CPR, choking, and things like this. I would say about 25 to 33%, and I don't have the correct statistics. Something like this. 1 of 3 or 1 of 4 is a real emergency that you have. If you won't get there very fast, would actually.
And how many calls do you get a day?
We get a call each 15 seconds. So taking into account that four calls a minute, it's more than 1,500,000. So if you would say one in 3, that's about 500,000 people a year that would actually die. I'm not talking about, as you said, listen, something is itching me, or it's something that people will not die from. We save each. This is my estimation.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand because, it's kind of like when you talk about IDF soldiers, everyone says like, this person's in an elite unit. Okay, everyone's in an elite unit, so I don't know what is not elite, right? So that's why I'm just trying to figure out how do we understand what a true emergency is? Because sometimes the perception is like everyone's dropping like flies over here. What's going on? I'm trying to understand how things are classified.
So when you call 101 Magen David Adom, as I mentioned, you are answered by a paramedic or an EMT. They know to ask the questions that will give them a notion of what's the emergency. Now there are clear cuts. If somebody is suffering from chest pain in the middle of his chest, this is something that the onset was relatively short while ago, they would suspect a heart attack.
Right.
And this is life-threatening
of course,
situation.
Right.
Okay. Now, if somebody would say, listen, I'm having a chest pain for the last 24 hours and things like this, this is probably not a life-threatening situation. Nevertheless, we would still send an ambulance to take a person to the hospital because it has to be further checked. Our teams are very skilled and are very knowledgeable in the variety of incidents that can endanger life. But but we know our place. We are not physicians. We don't have the most sophisticated equipment that the ER has in order to test a person. So we never say it's nothing. Okay, maybe
Well, but you're
characterize it.
actually bringing up a really important point here, I think, which is the most important thing is how quickly you can get that person to the hospital if it's a true emergency. It's not about even, yes, you want to stabilize them if they're in distress, right? I'm not a medic. I'm asking, right? You want to destabilize them, but ultimately you're not running around with the most high-end equipment that you'd have in a hospital. So you do want to get them there as quickly as possible, right?
So we do have a very sophisticated equipment, but for the emergency response. That
Right.
means we can perform an ECG on the field.
Right, but if someone needs an emergency surgery, you have to get them to the hospital as quickly as
Right.
possible.
A
Right.
paramedic can do some field life-saving procedures, but at the end of the day, if their heart need to be catheterized, then it can be done only on the hospital. But listen to this: our vision is to have Magen David Adom dispatch as the gateway for any medical distress that somebody has. Let's say that somebody is in the middle of the night not feeling well, and he knows that it's probably not an emergency. Still, he needs a medical attention. In our vision, he should call Magen David Adom, and we will be able to send him our paramedics equipped with blood testing equipment. Or we can have a specific doctor online telling him, listen, I want you to do this and this and this, actually providing telemedicine or remote attention to him. And you know what? We are prepared for this. We have the equipment, we have the knowledge. So even if somebody is not suffering from an immediate life-threatening situation, Magen David Adom can be there for him and do all the initial testing done in the ER. Why will it be helpful? First of all, we prevent unnecessary travel to the hospital. Second, we have more ambulances available for those life-threatening situations. If an ambulance is taking somebody who is not really having a medical distress or life-threatening situation, they might be caught up in the hospital. And if somebody else needs an ambulance, then we'll have to find out next nearby ambulances. We don't want the ambulances to be occupied doing
Unnecessary thing, right? Okay.
So we are waiting for the Minister of Health approval to allow paramedics to perform home testing, home blood testing, to provide remote medicine by doctors. But when it will happen, and I guess it will happen, it will change the health system in Israel, not only for Magen David Adom, but mainly for the people that don't have to spend 6 hours in the ER.
Well, I'm sure the times will be shorter in the hospital as well, because you'll have fewer people in the waiting room.
Exactly, because about 30% of the arrivals to hospitals are like a turning door. You come to the hospital, you spend there 6, 8, 12 hours, and at the end of the day, they say, listen, you don't have to go to the ward, you can just go home. So why spend so much time in the hospital if a Magen David Adom team can do the blood testing, a doctor can remotely check you and tell you, listen, go to your doctor tomorrow morning, instead of schlepping yourself to the ER middle of the night. So this is the future.
In terms of transparency, how much money does American Friends of Magen David Adom raise year over year?
Well, we need to look for
document. Okay.
Yeah, there is a document, but it's millions of
Well, I know it was millions. I didn't know if it was hundreds or if it was tens, but yeah, I know it was millions. Yeah. I mean, Michael Bloomberg himself gave something. I think he might have even put it into the 9 figures himself. But
I'll tell you what, in terms of fundraising, the war was amazing in terms of donations given to Israel, not only for American Friends of Magen David Adom, but for other organizations as
people stepped up is what you mean, right?
Definitely. And put aside the numbers, as an Israeli, this was one of the most heartwarming feelings I ever had. On October 8th, when we found out that there were like 1,200 Israelis that were murdered, we felt like we're underground, not on the ground, underground. But the support that we've got from so many people, seeing Americans coming with huge baggage, with equipment for the IDF soldiers and things like that, saying, listen, everything will be okay. But and once again, this is a but with a capital B. What will happen in the coming years? Okay. now that there is ceasefire, how do we make sure that the support remains? Because at the end of the day, in many areas, including in emergency medical services, the State of Israel and Magen David Adom relies on donations. So
I think, by the way, I think that's a problem. I'm just going to tell you. I think it's a big problem. I've said this the same way that when it comes to aid. Obviously, Israel's a young country, but I do think that the essentials of it, I would like to see some of the bureaucracy chipped away at. Meaning, I think that people should have an opportunity to step up and help. But in terms of some of the fundamental things, I do think that it should be. I would like to see adjustments in terms of how some of the stuff is done.
I
Yeah.
agree with you, but currently this is
So the current situation is where we are.
Right.
Correct. Yes.
and my question, which I don't have an answer, where will we be in 5 years? Because at the end of the day, it's our role to keep preparing for anything that will come. There is a ceasefire, but we know that Hezbollah is rearming, that Iran is providing.
Well, notice it's called a ceasefire, not a peace deal. So that's the difference, right?
Exactly. And we have to make.
Well, I guess actually the Gaza was called a peace deal, but that's not really a peace.
It's a ceasefire,
Yeah.
and let's say we know that our enemies are not going to become Zionists.
Correct.
So we have to ensure the people of Israel that we are prepared. Yes, the recent 2 years were amazing, and we will ever be grateful for people who stepped forward and said, "I'm going to support." The biggest challenge is what's next. What will happen next? And going back to marketing, yes, Magen David Adom has to tell clearly and to the people what we do and why does it matter, because we're not doing a very good job.
You and I can agree on that.
Yeah,
I think,
definitely.
listen, I would love to have you and your colleagues on all the time just to talk about these things so people actually understand what is going on. I think that so much of part of the reason I started this podcast was for very good reason. I'm not trying to impugn the character or say people are bad people or anything like this when it comes to media, but there's a lot of fake news. There's a lot of agenda-driven things. And my agenda, well, everyone has an agenda. My agenda in this is bringing transparency to the philanthropic situation, so people really have an understanding of where the money's going, what's going on, being able to ask questions. As you know, you and I discussed here, there was no question I couldn't ask you here. And I think that it's important that people understand exactly where the money's going, because until you really comprehend the state of Israeli bureaucracy, where people are holding in terms of economic situation in Israel, medical situation in Israel, it's very hard to understand what's actually a need, what's not a need, what sounds good but doesn't really help. And hopefully we're cutting through some of the noise so people can actually understand what is going on. Before I let you go, just 1 second on Iran. What was that like, being the main medical responders alongside the army when it came to the attacks, and you're having these massive missiles fired at you that could very well kill you while you're trying to rescue people?
Wow, that was massive. And Magen David Adom people are used to responding mainly for rocket attacks.
A Qassam.
Right. Like, even if it has, I would say, 100 kilos of TNT or something like this, at the end of the day, it causes like a focal damage. And
Right.
suddenly having dozens of missiles carrying 400, 500 kilos, it was very, very challenging. But Magen David Adom proved once again that thanks to the preparedness and the commitment of the people, we could do everything. At the second night of the attack, we had two parallel incidents. One in Bat Yam, where a missile just destroyed a whole block, and one in Rehovot, the one that hit near the Weizmann. In both locations, we had people running for destroyed buildings, extracting people outside, having to assess blast injuries, which are much harder to assess than penetrating trauma or things that you see. All of this under the threat of another missile being.
Yeah, I can't imagine. That's crazy.
More than 300 ambulances, motorcycles, other response vehicle working at the same time. 300. I think this is the largest response we had in the last 30 years. And Magen David Adom, Israel's national emergency services system, was able to respond. And we were the key for saving lives during the Iran war. And if I may say one more thing to our listeners, they are full partners in this. because at the end of the day, if Magen David Adom didn't had those 2,000 ambulances, we couldn't have said 300 ambulances for only 2 incidents. And we couldn't make sure that the entire country is covered from the north.
Right, because people still might have a heart attack in some other area. Right.
Exactly. You still have to report for the daily incident while doing this. And we needed to evacuate the Soroka hospital that were hit by a missile. And the fact that we had 3 intensive care buses that were able to do this in a very short time made us able to respond to the need. And for me, this is why Magen David Adom is Israel, because of the people, because of preparedness, because we have the most advanced technology, and we need to do a better story. And we need to tell our story better, which we don't. And this is why.
Well, no, listen, I'm glad you're here. You have the Daniel Mail stamp of transparency. So some people have asked, oh, are you going to do that? I haven't actually really come out with that, but in terms of, I judge it based on accessibility of answers. So I really appreciate you taking the time and not shying away from any of the more challenging questions. And if anybody has questions or anything like that, feel free to shoot them my way. I'm happy to pass it along. So that way you can continue to get the answers and be able to serve the state of Israel. And Uri, thanks so much for what you do.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'll be more than happy to have our people, invited to your podcast to further tell our story.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.